Welcome to Sisters-in-Laws TV. I'm your host, Erica M. McAfee. And October is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, a month dedicated to honoring and remembering our babies who have gone to heaven far too soon. I'm excited to present to you a series on surviving pregnancy loss. I know many of the stories you may hear may be triggering, so press pause, take a break, and come back to hear these powerful stories from sisters-in-laws who have survived pregnancy loss. Well, welcome to the Surviving Pregnancy Loss series. I'm your host, Erica McAfee, and I'm excited to introduce today's guest who is sharing their loss story. So welcome, Zay. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and what you do.
So my name is Xaviera, Zay Bell. So Zay is just much easier to say. And I live here in Raleigh, North Carolina. By day, I am a claims adjuster. But after the loss of my son in 2018, April 25th, 2018, I started a nonprofit organization called Zeal of Xander. Here in North Carolina. And it just kind of started because when I was leaving the hospital, one of the parking lot attendants asked me, could she have a piece of my cake? And I was so puzzled. I was like, what are you talking about? And my best friend had this humongous keepsake box, which was an actual pastry box that you would get from a Publix or a Walmart or something like that. So it was legitimately a pastry box. And my heart sank because I had to explain to her that, I did not have cake. Basically, I came into the hospital with a baby and now all I have left is a box of stuff that I cannot use. And so I did not want any other parent to have to explain that to anybody. So I started a partnership with UNC so that we could create keepsake boxes that did not look like the pastry boxes that they gave out. So we have been on that journey with them for quite some time. And so initially when I started, I wanted to help every mother that had lost children. But then I recognized, specifically here in North Carolina, Black women were 6 times more likely to lose kids than any other race. Nationally, we are 2 to 3 times more likely. In North Carolina, in Raleigh, we are 6 times more likely. So it is double of what the national statistic shows. And so I wanted to target specifically Black women and Black men with that organization. So right now we are working to produce literature. So we're doing the first anthology of a combination of women that have lost children and providers like birth workers and neonatologists, March of Dimes, like all of us are partnering together to produce this work. So that's what we're doing here in Raleigh.
Love it. I love it. So take us back on your journey to motherhood and share with us your loss story.
Sure. So I got pregnant with my son at 37. So I'll be 40 in the next couple months. And so I remember when I just took a pregnancy test on a whim. I'm like, oh, something kind of feels awkward. I'll just take this test. And I took the test and I remember thinking, what am I going to do with a baby? Like that is what my immediate thought process was. And so I was moving from Florida. My job relocated me to Raleigh, North Carolina. And when I moved here, I started to go to different doctors. I found my OB, and I went to the doctor, and they were like, "Well, we're gonna send you for a nearly 22-week anatomy scan." And I remember praying all the time whenever I had an ultrasound was, "God, please allow for his heart to still be beating." Like that was my consistent prayer. And so I went to the anatomy scan, and they were like, well, he is very active. Heartbeat is great. And I was like, oh, thank God. But they were like, we cannot find your cervix. And I was like, well, where is it supposed to be? They were like, it's supposed to be here. So he drew a little circle, and he was like, I'm going to ask the doctor to examine you. And I'm like, okay. And prior to that, I remember having cramping and spotting, and I had contacted my doctors to let them know that, and they were like, "Oh, you're probably just constipated. You know, you have a doctor's appointment coming up. You know, you can definitely address it then." The week before I had Xander, I told them that I was experiencing a little bit more discharge than I had normally noticed, and they did a test, and they said, "Well, you don't have an infection, so it just could be, you know, what normally happens." And I'm like, okay. And then they told me, "Well, we're going to change your due date." So Xander's due date was August the 20th, and they changed it to by 10 days to August the 30th. And I remember being very trusting of the healthcare system, because she looked at the ultrasound that I had from Florida, and she said, "You know, Xander's measuring a little small, so, you know, we're going to change his due date." I'm like, okay. What I did not know was that those 10 days would cost my son his life. And what I mean by that is that when they sent me, I had already dilated a centimeter. They sent me to get a cerclage. So by the time I made it to UNC, I was 2 centimeters dilated, and they could not do the cerclage. And I remember the doctor saying, "I'm so sorry for your loss." And it had not registered to me, because I was thinking, why would you tell me you're sorry about a loss that has not occurred? Like, he's still very much so alive. And so we're going to ride this wave out until my water breaks. My parents and my best friend drove 11 hours, and my water broke about 2 in the morning. I had Xander about 10:52, and he came out, kicked me in my leg, and I was so devastated. I told my best friend, I said, "They are going to sentence me to watch him die." And she said, "No, what we're going to do is we're going to love him to heaven." And I had to register that, because she that's the importance of having a great village, huh? Because she changed my assignment that day, because the only thing that I wanted to do that day was die with my son. And UNC told me, "We do not intervene when children are born less than 23 weeks." And I said, "Well, he would have been 23 weeks if you did not change his due date." So we watched my son transition, and they came and they told me, "Well, if you cannot afford a funeral home to come and get your son, what we can do is we can cremate him for you. However, we will not be able to provide you with his remains." And I was thinking, yeah, no, that's not gonna work for me. That's not gonna work. And I just never really thought about it until I was in one of the support groups online, and this young lady said I had to leave the hospital without my son. And so I started to research it. And in North Carolina, UNC specifically, is one of the locations that they do mass cremations. So ultimately, you would not know who you would receive back. Um, and I think that was the hardest process for me, just going through trying to make decisions, um, contacting funeral homes, you know, even going to his memorial service. I had the funeral home to apply for a travel permit for me. And so my parents were able to drive Xander back to Alabama and bury him in our family plot. But I remember just kissing him and my lips turning purple, because and they were numb, because, you know, for babies, they don't embalm them, they just soak them in the embalming fluid. And so, you know, throughout the process, I was just thinking, I wish somebody had told me what to prepare for. I wish that I had a resource that would allow for me to depend on them to assist me with bracing for the next wave. And I did not have that.
Mm. Man, oh man, so much to unpack there. What your friend told you, oh my gosh. I don't even know if I would have been in the right mindset to receive that.
Yeah.
But for her, just the closeness, and for her to know you and know exactly what to say to
Yeah.
get you to react and respond in the way you should have responded, that is so powerful.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, so powerful.
I was so blessed, and I am still very much so. But if you hear something, that is a crazy dog. But I am still very much so blessed to have people that my family, when they ask my mother how many grandchildren do you have, my son is in the number. That he's right down the street from their home, so he's the baby in the cemetery with a nightlight, and every single holiday he has the decor, Labor Day flags. So and that's her way of grieving, and I did not recognize that she needed that too. And I remember when I was standing outside of the funeral home with my parents, and I was just distraught. And I remember my mother taking her hands and she put it on my face like this, and she just held my face. And she said, the hardest place for a mother is to be with her child, and knowing there is nothing that I can do for you. She said, I cannot help you through this. She said, but what I do know is that I have seen you down before, and I know that you are great for a comeback, and I cannot wait to see who you are after this.
Mm.
And in those moments, I was thinking, because my plan was to go home and end my life too. When my parents left, they were gonna, that next Tuesday, they were going, the housekeeping, because I was staying in the corporate apartment, the housekeeping was gonna find me, and they were gonna have to contact my parents. And then I started to think how unfair it was for my parents to have to bury a grandson and a daughter too. So I had to figure it out. And so that's when me and God got into a tussle. We got into a battle, and I told him, hey, I'm not gonna hurt this man for no reason. You got to figure something out for me.
Yep, absolutely. You gotta figure it out. Like,
Yeah,
come here, God. Like, we gotta be right here.
right. Because me and him have some hard conversations. I'm like, look, I'm not doing that. I'm not.
No, and you want me to do this, when, and what,
Right.
and how, and step, and move?
Right. Yeah, like I'm not doing that.
Absolutely. So, how have you been doing throughout this coronavirus? I mean, we've been under lockdown over 6
Yeah.
months now. This pandemic has really shifted the
Mhm.
entire world. So, how are you doing? How's your family doing? What's going on? How are y'all making it through COVID-19?
COVID-19 has been very interesting. It has been the most darkest, most beautiful space. Um, dark because we have to isolate ourselves. We don't have that interaction. I can't per se, I wasn't able to, Xander's father and I was supposed to get married on his birthday, on his second birthday, and we had to cancel our wedding. So that happened. But then I was sitting in solitude. I said to myself, I'm not gonna sit here just do nothing. Look, I'm real country. I'm Alabama. I'm like, I'm not gonna sit here and do nothing. I'm just not gonna sit here and make pound cakes. I know that. Something else got to come out of this other than 20 extra pounds I done gained.
Right.
And so I started to reach out with my to my circle of people. And I was thinking about doing a book project. And so I reached out and I said, listen, I'm changing the face of how this book project looks. I need women that have lost children that are Black. And so right now we have about 40 women that's participating in the book project. And so I have been able to, not only just do several Zooms and hear the different stories and, to talk to different people about their loss and where they are. It's a very trying thing. I don't think that, I was explaining to somebody, I don't even remember the woman that I was before I lost Xander. Like, I don't even remember who I was prior to that. And that in itself is a blessing and a curse. But in doing the book project, what it taught me is no matter if it's been 2 years or 20 years, it still hurts the same.
Mm-hmm.
It still hurts the same. And so just being able to be in a village of great women, to be in a village of midwives and doulas. I'm a volunteer doula here at UNC, and my son's father does not understand it. Like, babies are his triggers. He was like, why do you want to do that? And so this week I was tasked to go back to UNC where Xander was born. And I had a little guy born, Zion. And one of the doctors that delivered Xander walked into the room. And
Wow.
I was like, hey, I've been looking for you, because I wanted to just, thank him, um, just for trying the best that he could to make a horrible situation as good as it could be. And I said, you delivered my son in 2018. And he said, how is he? And I was like, oh, he passed away. And so he was like, oh, and the room just fell silent. And my best friend was so emotional about it when I was talking to her. She was like, I don't understand why you're doing this. And I said, this has taught me a valuable lesson. And she was like, well, what is the lesson that it taught you? I said that your experience is not everybody's emergency. Because you don't know, because people don't automatically assume the worst. He did not have an expectation, and I'm sure that in those moments he walked away knowing that I cannot automatically assume that everybody has this beautiful rainbow at the end, because it's not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I love how, and that transitions me into my next question about just how you have really turned your pain into purpose. As you mentioned earlier about your organization you started for him, and then now this new book project. I would love to know, what do you do every year to memorialize Xander? Is it during October, which is Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month, or during the month of his birth and death? Share with us how you honor him on a, annual basis.
So annually, of course, definitely, with the Wave of Lights, we always do do a candle for him. August is a hard month. August and April are hard months for me. Specifically, April is when he was born, and then his due date was supposed to be August 20th. But every single year, what I decided to do was a photo shoot. And so every year I do a photo shoot, and I do a shoot with me and him. So we do that every single year. But mostly what I had to do was I had to put a expectation of myself of growth every year. What I learned in this journey is that grief is just love with no place to go, right? And so every year I challenge myself to learn something new in this space, to devote myself to something different in this space. This year, it was moving scared. Last year, I started moving scared when I had my son, because I knew that I was going to sit home and die. I just knew that. And so what I decided to do was I started to fly to places that I had never been, to meet people that I had never met, and to learn things that I would have never learned if I had not done that. And the pandemic put a halt to that. And so every quarter I fly to a different place to meet people that I've never met. And so this year I have been able to go to Oklahoma. I'll be going to Chicago this weekend, and in October I'll be going to LA. And so I traveled through my grief.
Mm-hmm. I love that. And I love that you truly sought out growth opportunities in your travels and meeting different people, seeing different experiences, and really, really talking to God through your travels.
Yeah. Because there was a time that I was not talking to him, period. I remember my mother, I grew up in the Bible Belt. Of course, I'm an Alabamian Baptist. And I remember my mother said I was going to therapy, and I built a mobile crisis team in Florida. So my team of clinicians were individuals that responded to, individuals that were in psychosis, that were homicidal, suicidal. So wherever that happened, that's where my team was dispatched. And I built their team for them, Simpatico's team for them from the ground up in the area. And just working in that space, I knew that when they came into my room and said, well, we can offer you this. And I looked at that particular person and I said, whatever you have, wrap me in services. Because I knew that I needed them. And so when I went to therapy, my mother said, I think that we should just pray. And I wanted to lie. Like I wanted to lie and say I am praying. Um, but I did not. I said, Mommy, I can't. I said, I just have no desire to talk to the Father, the Son, or the Holy Ghost. Okay. So if that's something that you think I need, then you're gonna have to do that. You're gonna have to intercede for me in that area because I cannot do it right now. And what I learned in the process is that God is big enough to allow for that.
Absolutely. And I think that the prayers of our intercessors and our ancestors are the reason why we're here today. So yes,
Yeah,
we thank
absolutely.
God for those intercessor prayer warriors, Lord.
Listen, somehow, because she was really praying. She was like, oh, I was scared. I was like, girl, keep.
Mama was on her hands and knees, Lord. She was like, Lord, you gonna get this spirit
Mama
out of my
said,
daughter.
She said, my knees are red. I said, well, keep on.
Keep on praying. And don't stop, Mama. Don't stop.
Don't. She was very diligent in that.
Absolutely. So how are you surviving pregnancy loss?
Well, you know what? I had to learn that I could not allow for someone to define how I should live through this loss, right? Because people were like, oh, you're just 90 days from losing your son and you've started a whole nonprofit. You're working so that you won't have to grieve. And then I started to believe it. I was like, oh, well, I'm working so I can forget. And then I realized, no, you are working through your grief. And so there is not a cookie cutter way to grieve a loss. You just never know what you're gonna do, because losing a child is different than losing a sibling or a parent or a cousin or a best friend or friends. It is something that is completely and totally undescribable, describable. You can't put a definition on it. That's why there's no word for it. People that lose their spouses are widows, people that lose their parents, parents that give up on their orphans, people that lose their children. We have no identity in the space. There's nothing to call it because it's too big for a word. And so what I had to learn was the way that I survived loss, the loss of Xander, is by not allowing people to force me into a space that they think that my grief should look like. I defined it. I grew him, I birthed him, and I released him. And so my duty in this life is to ensure that he is as purposeful in his death as he would have been in his life. And that's how I grieve my son, and that's how I survived pregnancy loss.
I love that. I love that. So where can we learn more about your organization and connect with you after this episode goes live?
Yeah, so you can certainly reach out to me at zealofxander.org. We are, lavender reminds me of my son, and lemons. His colors are yellow and black because his baby shower was going to be a bee themed. So what we started to do, and we are working with partnerships now so that we can do aromatherapy boxes for moms. So we'll be releasing that along with the book next year. Next year on Xander's third birthday, we'll be releasing the book that we're working on. It's called The Morning After. So you can certainly find me at zealofxander.org, and you can certainly send me an email, zay@zealofxander.org. I'm on social media, Zeal of Xander. I am Zaybell, either on Instagram or Facebook.
Thank you so much, Zay, for sharing your story and your light with us and your powerful organization in Raleigh. If you all are in Raleigh, definitely contact her, or in the Triangle area. I mean, not just Raleigh, Durham, all around.
Yes, I'm here.
Definitely contact her and get in touch with her and all the services that her organization offers.
Yes.